If you watched my brown butter white chocolate ganache recipe over the summer, you probably knew this was coming. As soon as I made that, I just knew I had to try out a version that used fresh sage for fall, especially with Thanksgiving around the corner. What a perfect November, fall, winter holiday treat. I loved it as an idea. I love the end result. I can't wait to show you. So let's get into this. First of all, we need some brown butter. I'm gonna get this butter onto my stove, and basically if you've never made brown butter before, first you melt your butter. It's going to look nice and bubbly. It's gonna, liquefy. It's basically gonna look super normal like melted butter. It's gonna get a little bit foamy, but it's still gonna look pretty pale yellow, and then it's going to start turning brown very lightly, and depending on how far you want to go, you can leave it a fairly light brown butter. You can, be a little bit crazy. You can keep it on the heat, really turn it into a really rich, dark, deep brown color. The longer you go, the more intense the flavor is going to be. But just keep in mind the first part, when the butter is melting and simmering, it, kind of takes a while. And then as soon as it starts to brown, it goes from light brown to burnt brown pretty quickly. So in the beginning, you don't necessarily have to be whisking this the entire time, but as soon as you start seeing some brown flecks in there, you need to be standing right there. You want to be whisking constantly, and once you reach a kind of deep brown color, pull that off the heat. And better yet, transfer it to a jar or another heat-proof container. Even if you turn it off the heat from the pan that it's in will continue cooking the butter, so it could deepen even further even after you remove from the heat. So I will leave this process in here so you can take a good look. And the way that I'm going to get the sage in here is by right at the end, I am going to toss in some fresh sage leaves. As soon as they hit the really hot butter, they are going to get really crispy and they fry themselves like immediately. It is so delicious. And if you let them sit in the butter for a little bit, remove them onto some paper towel, you end up with these crispy, delicious sage leaves. Those leaves you can later crumble into your brown butter ganache, or you could just eat them, put them on pasta. Oh my gosh, the sky's the limit. So depending on how intense of a sage vibe you want, you can either keep some or all of your sage leaves in the ganache, or you can take them out. So as you can see, I got those brown bits developing there. I'm taking it off the heat and immediately throwing in my sage leaves. You see them bubbling there. They are frying and getting really crispy. The butter is infusing with all of that delicious sage goodness. And after a little bit of letting them sit in here, I am going to transfer them out onto some paper towel. I ended up crumbling a few of these sage leaves into my ganache later for a really intense sage vibe. Again, that is up to you. As you can see here too, the brown butter right now is quite warm. It is really nice and beautiful in color. I'm going to let it cool off before I add it into my ganache later on. So you can speed up this process by putting that brown butter into the fridge, or just let it cool completely at room temperature. All right, now I'm just going to proceed with my pastry cream style white chocolate ganache, more or less like normal. I've got my cream in a pot. I've got both white and brown sugar. I think brown sugar is really great, especially to pair with something like brown butter and sage for a really nice warm flavor and vibe going on here. Though, of course, if you don't want to add in the brown sugar, you do not have to. You could go with 100% just regular regular sugar, that is your choice. I am going to heat this over my stove until all of the sugar has dissolved and the cream is a bit warm. Then I'll temper it into my other cream and cornstarch. Now, as I mentioned, this is a pastry cream style ganache. So what I'm doing here, this is the process of making a pastry cream. Yes, the cornstarch is necessary. Yes, the sugar really helps. It's not necessarily there even for sweetness. It is there more for forming this really beautiful, thick, glossy structure and texture. If you want to play around with reducing that, go ahead, that's on you. This is my method that I like. This is the recipe that I like. It's okay if you want to play around with it. Don't worry about it, but this is what I really, really like to do. After I finish making this pastry cream, I will transfer it over to my waiting chocolate. So if you're like, wait, wasn't this the ganache? Yes, the chocolate is just waiting to the side, along with a bit of regular butter that's at room temperature and that brown butter with the little crispy sage leaves. When you're making this pastry cream style ganache, or really any pastry cream, after you've tempered in the two cream mixtures, you want to whisk this pretty constantly over a low or medium low heat until it's looking nice and thick. I like to cook it for maybe 30 seconds after it's looking thick to make sure that I've really cooked out that cornstarch, but I do know that overcooking this can cause a lot of problems. So if you are nervous about that, as soon as it's looking thick, you absolutely can pull it right off the heat. That might solve some of your problems if you are experiencing any difficulties. While I am doing that, I also like to and recommend maybe semi-melting the white chocolate you are going to be using. Usually I just do it for like 30-40 seconds in the microwave. Having chocolate that is already a little bit warm reduces the amount of work that the pastry cream is going to have to do later to warm up and melt that chocolate. So if we pour on the hot sort of thickened cream mixture onto the room temperature chocolate, it will absolutely still work, but it needs to go to a bit more of an effort. So if you melt the chocolate a little bit, it'll just be a little bit easier. All right, this is looking really nice and gorgeous and thick here. As you can see, it's a tiny bit brown already from the brown sugar, and I'm just pouring it completely in one go over my semi-melted white chocolate. Yes, you absolutely can try this recipe with other kinds of chocolate, but personally, pairing it with the brown butter and the sage, I think white chocolate is probably your best option because using a dark or milk chocolate is really going to overpower or fight with those a little bit more delicate nutty flavors. So I don't necessarily recommend it for this exact recipe. I am just going to give this a little bit of a mix to make sure that all of the white chocolate is completely melted. I am using just a spatula here. You can use a whisk, but later on, once I emulsify in the butter, I really honestly recommend switching to an immersion blender. This is really going to emulsify your ganache really nicely, and I am doing this about 15 to 20 minutes after I was first stirring up the ganache mixture. That is because the texture will be a lot better if you add in your room temperature butter while this ganache is not hot, when it's just warm. After I've got all of my butter in there, I'm adding in my brown butter. Depending on how much of a brown butter flavor you want, you can increase or decrease this amount. And as I mentioned before, save aside those crispy little sage leaves and you can crumble them up into your ganache. Or again, you already have a little bit of a sage vibe in your brown butter. You can leave it just as it is to have a really subtle sage flavor, or crumble them in for a more intense sage brown butter taste. I like to really emulsify that to make sure that everything is thoroughly combined in there. I don't mind having little flecks of the sage, but if that's something that bothers you, as you're pouring this into either a sheet pan like me to cool or into another container, you can pour it through a strainer. That is no problem. That will remove those little bits of sage, and as you were emulsifying them, they probably already released a bit of their flavor already, so that's up to you. I am going to really quickly show you how I made the French method macaron shells for these brown butter sage macarons. As you saw there, I have all of my normal ingredients for making a French method macaron shell. If that is new to you, the French method means I'm using room temperature egg whites and a regular old granulated sugar with a bit of cream of tartar that I'm just streaming in. There is no heat added here, so it is a very fast, very easy method for making macarons. I'm going to be adding in some powdered colorants here. The two I'm using are from the Sugar Art Master Elites colorant in True Brown and Emerald. I really wanted to create a sort of sage green color with the colorants I already had on hand. And whenever I'm using a powdered colorant like this, I really like to add it in while my meringue is still whipping. You could add it into the egg whites at the beginning. Honestly, that would be fine. Or you could add it in while you're doing your macaronage later. But I really like to add in my colorants after the sugar is incorporated, when I'm about 70% of the way done. The reason I used Emerald and the True Brown is because I wanted to mute that really vibrant green to get something that was a little bit more sage looking. Once I get that really nice stiff peak, I'm going to transfer all of my meringue to a larger, wider bowl. That is a personal preference for a small batch like this. I really like to have the visualization. I like to do this by hand, and I'm going to add in my dry ingredients in 3 additions. If you want to do the macaronage, and if you want to add in your dry ingredients in your mixer or with a hand mixer or whatever it is, that is totally fine, completely up to you. This is just what I am the most familiar with, what I do the most often. And macarons, I've said this 1,000 times, Even though there are so many recipes and tutorials, and I personally have hundreds of macaron tutorials here on YouTube, it is all about finding what works the best for you and works the best for you in your current kitchen with your current tools. That is something that might change over time. It is something that might change during different times of the year. It might change depending on what method you're using. It might change depending on the batch size you're making. It might be different if you work in a professional kitchen and then you go home and have a very different oven and setup waiting for you. It's okay to do very different things, and that's why it's really great and actually really important to play around with different recipes, different techniques. And it's honestly okay if I am doing something and showing you something and you're like, that is not what works for me. It's okay, it's normal even. People have differences. Macarons are just they're putsy, they're tricky to make. A lot of things can go wrong, which is why I love making tutorials so that if something is going wrong, hopefully this can help you a bit. Hopefully this exact method will work for you, but if it doesn't, it's okay. It's nothing wrong with my recipe and there's nothing wrong with you. You might just need to do a little bit more trial and error to see what's going on in your own kitchen. So back to the macaronage here. After my dry ingredients are in, I'm going to continue to fold, kind of scrape through my batter against the sides of the bowl, scrape it through the middle until I get to a ribbon stage where the batter flows from my spatula back down into my bowl in this really nice, thick, steady stream. I'm going to transfer it over to my piping bag. Generally, I like to use a 803 or an 804 piping tip and pipe right onto a silpat, either one like this that has a template in it, or to use one without a template and to use a printed off template below there. When I am making my own templates, I just find an image on Google I like and make my own template in Google Docs. For all of the tools that I really love using, I do have an Amazon influencer storefront page. If you want to check that out, the link is down below. I have lists of tools I like, ingredients I like, boxes I like, all these different kinds of things. So make sure to go down there and click that, check it out, especially if you are hunting for something new to use or try out in your kitchen. After I pipe this tray of macarons, I'm going to use my the bottom side of my tray just to tap it a little bit, release any air bubbles, smooth out those tops a little bit before I let them rest. Usually I let my macarons rest in my home kitchen for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then I'll bake these for about 16 to 18 minutes. This might change depending on where you are, how humid it is, all kinds of different things. As you can see, I bake one tray at a time right in the middle of my oven on an upside down tray. That is because I really am cautious about anything interfering with my macarons, and the lip of the tray can sometimes cause an airflow interruption that can cause lopsided shells. As you can see here, this ganache is fully at room temperature, and look at it. Oh my gosh, have you ever seen anything more beautiful? It is just very lightly brown with a slight kind of greenish tinge from those flecks of sage in there. It is so glorious. This brown butter sage ganache, the texture is amazing, the taste is amazing, the smell is amazing. Honestly, you really need to give this a try in your kitchen. If you decide to play around with this recipe or give it a try, make sure to tag me on Instagram. Let me know how it goes. Let me see your results. I love seeing what you guys create. After seeing something that I have tried out as well, it is so rewarding and so much fun. Just like any other macarons, you can sandwich these and get them into your refrigerator to mature for 24 hours. If you bit into these right away, the chances of the ganache just squidging out the sides and going everywhere and having a bit crunchier of a shell is high, so make sure to let those mature even though you want to dive in right away. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I really appreciate you being here. If you are not already subscribed down below, make sure to do that and jump over to Instagram at Maddie Brame to follow me there as well. I show a lot more behind the scenes, travel content, all kinds of things over there, so make sure you're following me both places. I'd love to see you again next time. I have a ton of great things coming your way you do not want to miss out on. All right, until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye.